Happy Friday and welcome to this installment of Epic Insight. This is Brian Lenz, Director of Sales here at Epic, and I'll be your host again for today's call. Thank you for joining us right before the long weekend and making some time today. You are truly dedicated retirement plan geeks like we. As you know, the publishing of the fiduciary rule has really driven a surge in interest and concern regarding fiduciary responsibility and how to properly manage it. Federated has partnered with noted industry experts Brad Campbell, Ann Schleck, and Gene Maloney to build these materials that you're going to see today that are based partly on Federated's own experience with DOL audits. With this in mind, we're joined by Steve Cronin, who will be sharing some valuable tools that Federated has built to help plan sponsors and fiduciary avoid a DOL investigation and to handle them should they occur. Steve is a Vice President and Senior Retirement Plan Consultant with Federated Advisors and is an industry veteran with over 35 years working in the retirement industry, including several years as the Head of Operations for a leading retirement service provider, several years providing retirement consulting services to advisors and sponsors, and is the former Head of Sales for a leading independent retirement provider. You'll see handouts for today's session available in the handout section of the control panel. And will be muted throughout the call, but if you have any questions for us that we'll address towards the end, feel free to enter those in the questions panel. Without further ado, Steve Cronin of Federated, take it away.
Hey, thank you, Brian. Thank you all. Again, here we are, 1 o'clock before a long weekend. You are dedicated, and hopefully this will be worth your while. I have been with Federated in total several years. 20 years ago, actually, was head of sales when we did record keeping and was fortunate to rejoin the firm a couple of years ago in my current capacity covering the Northeast. I'm joined by my counterpart, Tim Roshavitz, who covers the Midwest for Federated Investors, longtime veteran of the firm and the industry. And my internal partner, Damon Clayton, is on the line as well. Just very quickly, for those of you that might not know much about Federated Investors, a Pittsburgh-based mutual fund firm with roughly $360 billion under management. And within the retirement space, we have carved out for ourselves with our leader, Gene Maloney, a real focus on fiduciary matters. We don't really spend a tremendous amount of time with materials for participants, as an example, but when it comes to the matters involving fiduciaries, their responsibilities, their roles, what they need to do, what they need to be aware of, how to keep out of trouble, we are the preeminent defined contribution investment-only firm, the firm that advisors turn to for guidance. It's really where we've invested our time, our resources, and have developed a real expertise in this area. The first presentation, I thought we would review the Department of Labor investigation preparedness piece, award-winning. I'm going to just click here. I know you all can see what I'm doing, and there's a little bit of a blurb on the very first page about Federated. Brian mentioned Gene Maloney, Brad Campbell, former head of EBSA, George W. Bush appointee, and an author of some of the leading profound legislation governing employee benefit plans of the past decade, had a hand in putting this piece together. Some statistics on audits done by the Department of Labor. I'll just say that this piece is one of, if not the most popular value adds that our clients utilize twofold: to get meetings with plan sponsors that they wish to develop a relationship. They're trying to open the door, trying to get a meeting. Kind of goes like this: hey, you may be aware that there are more DOL agents than previously, and with that, you're more likely to be audited by a DOL agent. The typical response from a sponsor is, yeah, I think I've heard that. That makes sense. There's more agents more likely to get audited. Are you aware of what you need to pass a DOL audit if you were to get a knock at the door and a badge flashed in your face? And the response there typically is, no, I know I have responsibilities. I'm sure I need to have certain things that I can access readily, but no, as far as knowing them in detail, I don't. And Federated, as Brian mentioned, we ourselves got audited on our plan a few years back, and being a sales organization said, okay, how can we take this potentially miserable experience and turn it into a marketing sales opportunity. And we got approval from the DOL to use the actual letter we received, and just as importantly, those 22 items that were requested of us by the DOL auditor, and got approval to turn that into a marketing piece with the idea that this would be very beneficial to plan sponsors to make sure that they know what they need. So as I kind of go along in the piece, we stress get organized and little tips to make sure that one is prepared. But let's look at this here on page 7. This is the actual letter we received at Federated the day that we learned the DOL wanted to audit the plan. And maybe it falls under the heading, the cobbler's son has no shoes, but sure enough, we got tripped up. There was an item in the materials that we forwarded back, and what I'm looking at right now on page 9 are the 22 items that were requested of us. And when we sent all this into the DOL, lo and behold, if you look here on page 16, the DOL determined that the document seemed to try to absolve us of a collection of contributions. And lo and behold, they wanted to come in, they wanted to take a peek, and realized pretty quickly, as you can see on the next page, that we did have a second amendment to the trust agreement, which actually did address this matter. So in the end, we passed mustard with the DOL. But again, the experience was one that we thought, let's share this with our clients, our advisors, and for them to be able to share with their plan sponsors and/or prospects. And what Brad then did, and what we're looking at here is the sample bulletin from the U.S. Department of Labor on the subject of collecting delinquent contributions, and really a lot of verbiage that kind of addresses that matter. I imagine that once we realize we passed, that you don't need to really study all of this. But toward the end of the brochure is where Brad developed tips to pass a DOL audit. Brad is kind of the consummate Washington insider, having worked there for years and still resides there today. And we leaned on him, hey, Brad, what would you tell our clients if they were to get audited? Well, the first one is to position you, the financial intermediary, in the middle. The first tip is call an expert. Don't go a DOL audit alone. Get yourself in touch with an experienced retirement intermediary / advisor if you don't already have one. And this is, again, a nice way for you to offer your services to assist in these matters. One of the low-hanging fruits Brad always points to is that the letter we receive, and the DOL typically does request that material be forwarded to them within 10 days. Brad has said that's a pretty low-hanging fruit. Pushback, you're really pretty certain to get more time if you ask. You're not the only case that DOL agent is working on. So by all means, most people would like to have a little more time. Brad has indicated that that's something that more times than not you will be able to get if you were to ask. Another item that Brad points out is if it's easier for you to submit the information kind of on a piecemeal basis rather than all at once, whether it's in 10 days or 3 weeks, if that's easier, by all means, ask the auditor if you can do so. Some of the other comments here, be respectful, courteous, professional. It sounds like common sense, but definitely worth reviewing with the folks that the DOL agent is likely to be interacting with. Coordinate the process. Be efficient. Definitely a main tip is to the extent that you can have a person oversee the DOL's visit to the organization, even if other people are introduced to the situation, have that person, that singular person that can really walk the agent around and so forth, and make the agent feel comfortable, not like a stranger. Stay ahead of the process. Review the documents before you provide them. Another tip Brad always mentions is that if the DOL agent is there to visit based on information on the 401k plan, don't bring up items, matters that involve a pension plan, as an example. If the investment committee notes covering the 401k that the DOL is auditing includes information involving other plans like a pension plan, redact that information. If they didn't ask for it, you don't have to offer it. stay to the plan, stick to the plan that they're on. Prepare for interviews. Again, get people prepared. This might be the first time they've had, a federal agent with a badge flashing in their face, and you just want to make sure that they've thought that through and are not surprised and are cool, calm, and collected when the process begins. And again, the conclusion here is that an ounce of prevention is worth quite a bit. And if you kind of get your ducks in a row, know what you need to have in order to pass the DOL audit, you're much more likely to do so. Towards the end here, we have some samples of how to conduct an investment committee meeting. Feel free to check that out on our website. That information is provided right there, sample agendas and so forth. So that's the first piece. And now what I'm going to do, hopefully,
Yep. Steve, if you don't mind, this is Tim Mershevitz. Just a couple things to add regarding the DOL investigation preparedness guide. First thing is all DOL investigations always start with a letter. They do not start with a phone call. They may end up with a phone call, but it always starts with a letter. You made a great point. The DOL typically requests the information within 10 business days, provided electronically. I think that's a great prospecting question if you're talking to a prospect, to actually show them a checklist of what the DOL asks for and ask them, as your current provider, or are you able to provide this? If you received a letter today, would you be able to get this information and provide it electronically within 10 working days? There were statistics shared at the beginning of the DOL guide, 2015 statistics. And one thing that really stands out to me when I do a workshop for clients is I'll always get the question, I have a small plan. The DOL has no intention of ever looking at my plan. And while in theory that's correct, if you look at the statistics, and this is pretty standard amongst whether it's 2015 or even if you went back 2 or 3 years, you would find that of the total amount of recoveries that the DOL recovers through investigations, over half of the money that they recover started with a phone call from an employee or an ex-employee. So whether your plan is small or large, if an employee would call into the DOL and has a valid complaint, the DOL will investigate that plan. And by the way, the number one reason that plans are investigated, irregular pattern of remittances. And you probably have heard that, but that's the number one reason. That's all I had.
Great, thanks, Tim. Okay, so we're going to move on, mindful of the 30 minutes that we have together. And the next piece that we'll put up here, the fiduciary planning process. Let me just get the full view, full screen. Oh, here we go. And this was a piece came out not too long ago, but addresses, just as you would think, a guide for plan sponsors to ensure that they're meeting with their fiduciary responsibilities. Here we again, our own Gene Maloney, Brad Campbell, who has a hand in really about every piece that we put out on this subject matter, pretty darn close to all of them. And then Ian Schleck, a name that's pretty popular in the industry, a real top consultant to many firms, not just Federated. And as you can see, the 5-step process, we'll get into this a little bit, but step 1, establish and document a fiduciary goal. Understand your role as a fiduciary. Step 3, review the past year's committee minutes, your investment policy statement, existing committee charter and bylaws. Step 4, develop a fiduciary calendar for the coming year. I noticed a typo there, that we're missing an R there, Tim. Step 5, monitor the investments and key fiduciary activities with a checklist to ensure your fiduciary house is in order. And as you can see, I won't read the entire brochure for you, but each one of these steps is kind of blown up a little bit further as we go into the document. Establish a document and document fiduciary goal. You can see a sample of a committee goal checklist. Furthermore, on the next page as well, just kind of identifying what the priorities are. Step 2, understand your role as a fiduciary. Who is a fiduciary? What are the duties? I've said for years that plan sponsors, obviously very intelligent folks, they're running a business. They're sitting on this pile of money, if you will, when they implemented the plan, let's say, back in 1985, 86, 87. It's a sleepy little 401k, maybe that had $1 million in it. Years have gone by, markets have gone up, gone down. Maybe they've had some acquisitions, and all of a sudden that 401k plan is up to $15, $18, $20 million, and seemingly that ticking sound underneath the sponsor's desk is getting louder and louder and louder. And what it is the acknowledgement that while I know I've got responsibilities as a fiduciary, as a plan sponsor, I put this plan in place, I'm not sure precisely what they are. And that's what this brochure tries to do, is an educational kind of a tutorial. Who is a fiduciary, the types of fiduciaries. Here's a quick little breakdown on what those roles are. Act in the best interest of participants. Act with care, skill, prudence, diligence, and some bullets to kind of illuminate what doing that really means. And continuing on here to step 3. Manage your committee meetings, process, and bylaws. So it really gives you an idea of how you should run your meetings to make sure that you're meeting the governance of the plan. Discuss committee topics of interest. Now, again, just a helpful way of capturing what goes on in these meetings. Step 4, develop an annual fiduciary calendar. And this is an example. This is a piece that we can provide to you through Brian. But again, I presented on this just this week in New York, and one of the attendees said, boy, you know what I like about this is this gives you a real good reason to kind of have a touch point. You've got the calendar, you're a couple of weeks ahead of the next step that has to occur. What a great reason to pick up a phone and call the plan sponsor to say, hey, Helen, you know, we went over the fiduciary calendar, such and such is coming up in a couple of weeks. How do you look? Are you prepared? Are you ready to take care of it? So it puts everybody kind of on the same page and kind of flushes out in the course of a year what needs to be done and when. Step 5, the all-important investment monitoring and oversight process. And you can see some of the steps and some of the considerations there. Tim, do you have any comments there?
Yeah, the Fiduciary Planning Process Guide is an unbelievable resource, in my opinion, to offer your current clients, but also, again, another great prospecting question to simply ask. Has your current provider provided you any type of formal training on your fiduciary roles or responsibilities? And it's important to note that the DOL just this year actually added it to their formal checklist when they're going through an investigation. There is actually a question now that specifically asks the retirement committee, have you ever received any formal retirement committee training on what your roles and responsibilities are as a fiduciary? In most cases, the answer is no. But for the ability to utilize this resource, both with current clients as well as with prospects, it's a great tool. It can help you cement your relationships with your current clients, but also raise some eyebrows for clients who currently have a service provider who's not providing this. And your ability to offer this, both myself and Steve, we do workshops on both the DOL investigation and this fiduciary training. We make them fun, they're informative. I do many of them, and they all end very positively in that the clients walk away, or the prospects as well, walk away with great training and a great leave behind in this fiduciary planning process guide to take back, share with their committees, and put it in their fiduciary folder.
Great. Okay, thanks, Tim. And now I'm just going to call up the next piece here. And I think I'll skip to Beyond Gravity. This is one of our older pieces and yet another award-winning value add. Tim mentioned how important it is to be trained as a fiduciary. What did I sign up for? Or what is included? You heard me reference that in Tim in the fiduciary process piece. There's going to be some overlap with this particular piece, but it is just really so much more that can be offered by utilizing this. This is a piece that can be privately labeled, I should mention. As you can see underneath the title, Beyond Gravity, this is a guide for fiduciary meetings. And what clients really like about this piece is that it's written in kind of two fashions, and you have two versions of almost every piece that we'll go through quickly here. One for those folks for whom being a fiduciary is a first-time experience, and another version of the pieces we'll review for those for whom this is the 10th, the 12th, 15th year that I've been to an investment committee, that I've been to fiduciary training. I really don't need to go into the weeds, so it kind of cuts to the chase a little bit. On this screen, you'll see a little red button. That simply denotes that the material that we're looking at the time can be printed off, privately labeled by you, and it's a piece of material that comes along with this program. And if you had a hard copy version of Beyond Gravity in front of you, you would see that there's an actual CD in the back of the brochure. These materials with the red dot that can be privately labeled can be accessed either by utilizing that CD or jumping on the Federated Investors website. But let's get into it a little bit. Step one, building the meeting agenda. As you can see on the left-hand side is an agenda for first-timers. On the right-hand side, what we call a refresher meeting agenda for those folks that have been doing it for a little bit of time. Step two, select the slides for the meeting. There's just a host of slides that follow, all of which can bear your logo, and you can determine which slides are appropriate. We err on the side of kind of giving you more than you might need, and we strongly suggest that you look at the slides to pick out the ones that make the most sense. Invitations to the training session, again on the left-hand side, an invitation that is addressed to people that have not participated in this process, and then an invitation to those that for whom this will be a refresher. Hopefully for those folks that are doing this for the first time, they don't run out the door wondering what the heck they signed up for. Build the meeting support tools. Here's the fiduciary calendar. We just saw that on the right. Establish fiduciary committee goals. As I mentioned, there is some overlap between this piece and the previous piece. You see the red dots, again, indicating that these pieces can be printed off and with your logo affixed to it. Some of the other pieces that we just saw, the fiduciary checklist, is the fiduciary planning process, the DOL tool that we reviewed. But let's talk about the slides that are associated with the fiduciary training, which we've not yet seen. I'm going to skip right to it. Here are a bunch of slides that you can utilize in educating your plan sponsor client on, again, what their role is as a fiduciary. But take a peek at it. By all means, get your logo on there. Pick the slides that make sense. They may not all make sense depending on the level of education, knowledge on this topic, and you can decide what makes sense. And again, Brad Campbell, Ann Schleck, and our own Gene Maloney, the co-authors of Beyond Gravity. Tim, I'll throw it back to you.
Yeah, the Beyond Gravity guide is essentially, or the fiduciary planning process guide is simply an extension of the Beyond Gravity guide that we're looking at. So the Beyond Gravity guide for an advisor or a financial consultant gives you a lot of ammunition on how to do a meeting, how to send invitations out, the actual slide presentation, and as Steve had mentioned, allows you to customize that presentation. What we found is a lot of advisors and financial consultants who use the Beyond Gravity guide mentioned that some of their retirement committees maybe consist of 1, 2, or 3 people, and doing a PowerPoint presentation may or may not have made sense depending on where the meeting took place. And so they came back to us and said, is there anything that you can provide to us as a leave behind that contains this information so that we could potentially meet clients at for breakfast and walk them through the process during breakfast versus in a typical office setting. So we developed the fiduciary planning process guide as a complement to the Beyond Gravity guide. But the Beyond Gravity contains just really helpful hints on how to organize the meetings and best practice ideas from Brad and Gene and Ann on how to organize these retirement committee meetings, because as we all know, it's difficult to get people together even twice a year, sometimes even once a year, and this provides some practical suggestions on making sure that when the committee meetings take place, they're organized, the people are excited to attend, and most importantly, they do attend at least once to twice a year.
Thanks, Tim. And I think we have about 2, maybe 3 minutes left. I am not going to be the person that goes over on a late Friday afternoon before a long weekend, so let me be succinct in reviewing the next piece. ERISA and the responsibilities of a plan sponsor, the need for an experienced intermediary. Has a lot of applications, can be privately labeled by you. The example I give, though, is let's say you're prospecting plans that don't have an advisor. Perhaps you're with a provider, a direct competitor, but they don't have an advisor, and you call up looking for a meeting, perhaps making a suggestion of change to the plan. But before you even get that far, of course, the first question is, well, why do I need you? I don't have an advisor today. It sounds like something maybe I don't need. Everything's hunky-dory. Why would I add an advisor? And that's what this piece in 6 or 7 pages succinctly drills down on, is the benefits of working with an experienced intermediary. The biggest benefit is, of course, that it's going to help you keep out of fiduciary jail. That it's not enough for a plan sponsor to say, hey, I'm running an envelope company. I don't really know what my responsibilities are. I'm not a fiduciary pro. Hey, the bottom line is you are expected, whether you self-educate yourself on matters pertaining to serving as a fiduciary or a plan, or if you align yourself or get a third party, such as a financial advisor, one way or the other, you are ultimately responsible for obtaining the experience necessary to run a plan effectively. And just breeze right through here, the legal foundation, there's a little review of the prudence rule, application to the role of financial intermediaries, which very quickly kind of points out to a plan sponsor the benefits of working with a financial advisor, and the conclusion there. But with it coming up against 1:30, Brian, I'm sorry to be rushed, but we wanted to make sure that we touched on each of the pieces. I'll send it back to you, Brian.
Yeah, that's really fantastic stuff, Steve and Tim, and appreciate you sharing these resources with everyone. I'd kind of like to plant the seed that in addition to working with your existing clients on some of these processes, I think some of this stuff could be leveraged into the focus of a great prospecting event. Maybe do a couple-hour breakfast or lunch, bring in some of your existing clients and some plan sponsor prospects, and walk through this process and just demonstrate your expertise in this area. So might be a good sales tool on many fronts, in addition to just one-on-one meetings and calls. I think you could leverage this for a larger audience. But with that, we'll open the floor to any questions. We did have a couple come in here, and if you have any for us, please enter those in the questions panel. One thing that came up with your first piece, Tim, I believe you mentioned that irregular remittance is the #1 issue triggering a DOL audit. Can you rattle off a couple of the other common triggers, maybe the top 3 or so, if you happen to know those?
Off the top of my head, I know one. I have a friend who is a former DOL enforcement officer in the Kansas City office. She's now an advisor, and we were chatting, and she said that the ERISA bond coverage is also an easy one for them, for the simple reason that as plans grow in assets, sometimes the ERISA bond coverage, while you may have kept the same ERISA bond coverage from day one of the plan, well, if that plan grows from $2 million to $6 million, you need to check your ERISA bond coverage to make sure that that's in line with the assets of the plan. I do know I presented along with a DOL enforcement officer, the DOL investigation guide, And at the end of the presentation, the enforcement officer who had a chance to look at our booklet came by and he said, "Tim, great information, and I love this. This is a great reference tool. I would not change anything." He said, "But there's only one thing I would change in your presentation." And during my presentation, I had cited a statistic stating that in about 70% of the cases, the DOL will find something, albeit something perhaps small, wrong with a plan. And his statement to me was, the actual correct number is 100% of the time. We will find something 100% of the time. Now, that may be something that can be correctable very easily, but even if you have someone like Gene Maloney, who is our fiduciary for our name, for our 401k plan, I think that's, that shows that even with Gene at the reins of our 401k plan, the DOL still found something wrong with the plan. But the ERISA bond coverage is a pretty big one, irregular pattern of remittances. And off the top of my head, I can't think of a third, but if I do here in the time that we have left, I will share that.
All right. Thank you, Tim. And I know we've seen throughout the presentation samples of checklists and committee meeting agendas, fiduciary calendars, CDs. I assume all of that is available for you guys if our partners reach out to their federated sales consultants, and we will share contact information with everyone following up the webinar here.
Brian, I do have one more addition, and it's very simple, but it's very true, and that is that the plan sponsors need to read their plan document, they do need to read their investment policy statement, and they do need to follow those documents, because the DOL, first thing they're going to do is ask for those documents, and then they're going to look for the plan sponsor documentation provided by the plan sponsor to support what was actually in those plan documents. So read the plan document, follow the plan document, same thing with the investment policy statement. Anything that's in writing, you want to make sure that you have done it, and most importantly, you want to make sure that you've documented.
Yeah, very good point. And the wisdom on that is, if you're going to, for example, with the IPS, if you're going to create an IPS, you better be following it. You'd actually be better off not having an IPS than having something in writing that you're not adhering to. So, not that I would encourage that, but important to know, if you are putting it in writing, you better follow it, because that's easy pickings. So, all right. With that, we'll wrap up for the day, and thanks to Steve, Tim, and the Federated team for joining us and sharing their insights. And I appreciate all of you taking time to kick off the Memorial Day weekend, and look forward to seeing you at a future session. And as always, appreciate the partnership. So take care, everyone, and enjoy the long weekend.
You too.